you. Thank you so much for hosting us. I'm Sean Antonucci, and Anya, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Anya Berg. I'm an adult services librarian at Valley Cottage. I do want to preface today's presentation by saying that the program I'll be talking about today was hosted when I was at the Palisades Library.
That's fair. So yeah, right now we're both at Valley Cottage and hope to be there for a long time. And we'll be discussing pivoting our creative and artistic programs from in-person to virtual, and thus the title of our presentation. So before we discuss the pivot, we'll give you some background on why we started each of these programs in their writing workshop and a creative recovery program. And we'll explain how they operated pre-pandemic. Then we'll share the changes that we made to transition the programs to a virtual space and the lessons that we learned from the experience. Hopefully by the end of the presentation, you can feel confident in going back to your own library to start one or both of these programs. So when I started at the Valley Cottage Library in 2015, my coworkers were beginning to explore the maker movement and considering how to apply those ideas at our own library. The questions being asked were, how can we continue to transform our library into a community space for both learning and creating? More specifically, would we purchase and learn how to use a 3D printer, as some of our neighboring libraries had, or would we go the more low-tech and crafty route, which is what we ended up doing, the latter. A colleague started our community closet, sort of our library of things, where we lend bakeware and various small appliances. My coworkers and I started hosting programs for people in our age range, which included crafting and other easy do-it-yourself activities. So since I was joining these conversations as they were already occurring, I was considering what I could add and decided to try to start a writing group. I had minored in creative writing in undergrad and taught a few semesters of an introductory freshman writing course as a teaching assistant while getting a master's in English Lit at SUNY New Paltz. So writing had been an interest of mine for a while. The original format for VC Writes was an hour-long evening program that featured a discussion of various elements of craft and concluded with a series of writing prompts. Some of the example articles that I shared were an excerpt from Anne Lamott's Bird by Bird, and that was about the need of writing a terrible first draft just to get something out on the page, and also Elmer Leonard's Rules for Writing. Leading up to the program, I borrowed several books with writing prompts and exercises that were available in our library system, and started a Word doc of interesting prompts, with attribution, of course. I gave the participants homework to further develop one of their responses to the prompts to share at the beginning of the following session. This is the blurb from our newsletter from July of 2016. I described the program then as an informal monthly discussion about writing, featuring writing prompts and exercises to beat the block. The block being writer's block. This is the first flyer. And now I know, not great in terms of design. For me, these were pre-Canva days, so I used Microsoft Publisher to create this. But I did like the idea of having these tearaway prompts along the bottom of the flyer with the meeting dates and times on the back of the prompts. So when reflecting on the evolution of the group for this presentation, I had recalled that the homework element eventually took more and more of the hour with less time for the craft discussion and the writing prompts. So I thought it was just sort of a natural progression, and I was responding to the needs of the group at the time. And while that was certainly the case, I was surprised to be reminded in my original proposal for the program that I had anticipated that the group might eventually transition to a writing workshop, and wrote in that proposal that my concerns in starting it as such were that it takes time to separate critiques of the work from criticism of the author, and hopefully the authors would feel less attached or defensive about receiving feedback on something that they had written in 10 minutes versus something that they spent a lot of time on. That over time, a sense of community and shared respect would develop, and fortunately, develop it did. So by 2017, the group transitioned from the writing prompt-based group to more standard writing workshop. People write over the course of a month and then submit their work via email a week before our session. We all read and comment on all of the submissions during the week leading up to the meeting, and then share our feedback at the monthly session. This is an exact timeline here. So the Monday, the week before the meeting, I send out an email with the date and time of the meeting in bold, and the date and time submissions are due, also in bold. I found that was important. And as well as a reminder that any late submissions will be saved for the following meeting. The guidelines are pretty broad. It's just double spaced, 20 to 30 pages max. We have people writing in various genres and for various age groups. We have children's fantasy authors, young adult science fiction, poetry, memoir, sections of novels, and even a few slightly controversial political essays. Eventually, I started asking the authors to include questions for us as readers to guide our critiques because, for example, not everybody wants grammar feedback, and perhaps an author is specifically working on their dialogue in a given draft. So by the summer of 2019, we start receiving submissions from 10 or more people, which was very exciting, but it did present with a bit of a time management issue, even with the program now regularly lasting for 2 hours. So I decided to send out a survey to the participants to see how best to proceed. The easiest method would be, of course, to host the program twice per month, but I sort of worried that that would result in people only showing up for the session where their work was being critiqued, which would mean that people were receiving less feedback overall. So ultimately, the majority of the group requested that we continue to divide up the time evenly for all the submissions, and that resulted in about 10 minutes per submission. So what I learned from the changes so far, this is before the big change, with each change from the original shift from prompts to workshop to minor changes to the submission guidelines and time management, I tried to respond to what the group as a whole needed at that moment and got buy-in through the surveys, sharing the results, and also offering an opportunity to discuss alternative solutions. Turn and face the strange. So when we closed due to the pandemic, I continued to work to seek the group's input. The library had canceled all of our programs through April. And by mid-April, when it was clear that we might not be going back to normal anytime soon, little did we know, I sent out another survey to the group with 2 options for future meetings. Either continue and submit and share feedback via email only, or transition to a monthly Zoom meeting. Fortunately, the majority of the group chose the latter, and at the time I was not certain that they would. We have people from a variety of, or in a variety of age groups. You know, I have people in their 20s all the way up to somebody in his 90s, and the majority of the group does continue to come to the Zoom meetings. There is one person who decided not to, but he still shares his feedback via email. So facilitating virtually, by the end of 2019, we no longer needed the timer in every session, but I did bring it back for the first few virtual sessions to keep the conversations moving. I don't know about you, but I've certainly been in Zoom meetings with friends and family where the conversation just kind of drags on, and I did not want that to happen for my program. So to try to minimize when people would unintentionally talk over one another, I made some artisanal handmade signs, and these are, of course, written in Sharpie. I adjusted our reading period from 1 week to 2 because many people were reporting general pandemic fatigue, making it extra challenging to read all of the submissions in 1 week. So the lessons that I learned: if you want to start a writing group, it is worth keeping in mind to be clear about what your program is and what it isn't. Some people join looking for a writing coach or an instructor, even a guru, and that's not how my group works, at least. When transitioning to a virtual session, it might be good to host a training session. This sort of works for any sort of virtual program. Just give participants the opportunity to test out the technology and ask any questions. It's a good idea to have a backup plan. For example, my power went out during one of the writing group meetings, and I was fortunate enough to have my cell phone with me. So I used that as a Wi-Fi hotspot until I could let somebody who was coming late in from the waiting room. And then I just ended up calling into the Zoom meeting to not waste more data and battery. Side note, if for some reason virtual meetings or emailing the feedback doesn't work for you, you could still engage your local authors. For example, there's a fantastic librarian at the Brooklyn Public Library by the name of Addie Smock, who shares teen writing prompts on Instagram through an Instagram story every Wednesday. And also, it's a good idea to provide tips on how to give constructive feedback. You know, we all have our favorite genres or forms of writing that we like. So it can be difficult to critique a piece that is outside of your comfort zone. Like if you don't read poetry or romance novels, you want to have more to say to somebody than just, that's not something I read. So we're getting to the end of my section now. Like all programs, creative programs are a social outlet, but they are also often more personal. Consulting with the participants on the changes allows them to feel ownership of the group and therefore to stay invested. And people being invested means that there is a positive group dynamic. We regularly correspond outside of the writing group sessions, offering advice, sometimes just to chat. I've reread entire manuscripts for people and then gone out to dinner with them to discuss. More participants, the best advertisement is, of course, word of mouth. Writers attend multiple groups, I've found, so they can bring you people from other libraries or groups. And if you're offering it virtually, you might reconnect with former members. I now have people who are attending who had previously moved away to New Jersey, even somebody who's currently teaching English in Japan. So at this point, I'm considering maintaining some sort of virtual component for future meetings. And now I turn it over to Anya to discuss the Artist's Way.
Thank you, Sean. So this morning I'll be discussing another program focused on creativity, which is meant for, as I say in the program advertising, those who create art to live and those who simply wish to live more creatively. And that's the Artist's Way workshop program series. This is one that I offered for the first time in the spring of 2016 at the Palisades Free Library, and most recently in the spring of 2020 online. So if you are like many of the participants in this program series, you may have a copy of The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron collecting dust on your shelves in your personal library or on the library where you work. Every once in a while, if you're feeling inspired, you may catch your eye for you give it a second glance, but never really enough for you to crack the spine open. Maybe you've seen it several times in your book travels, but after reading all the way through the subtitle, have decided it's not for you. And that was me when I first saw the book. Or perhaps you've never heard of it at all. So to provide a little background for you all, the book was originally published in the early 90s and has since remained popular enough for the author to put out a host of related titles that build on and update the content of the original. When the first one came out, this was really pre-computers and pre-internet. So you can imagine there have been a lot of changes. As the cover suggests, it is a course intended for those looking to get back in touch with their creativity or to overcome blocks related to their creative work. It's set up as a 12-week journey through the text with tasks to be completed each week in addition to the reading. So the two major practices promoted by Cameron in The Artist's Way, which I'll cover here briefly to provide you some context, are morning pages, which are 3 pages of stream of consciousness writing completed at the start of your day, and artist dates, which is a weekly solo activity meant to inspire your inner creative child. The idea is that you rid yourself of whatever negative garbage you've got going into your mind each morning with the morning pages and fill yourself back up with positive inspiration each week with the artist dates. So why would a programming librarian or potential program participant want to get into all of that? It sounds, for lack of a better term, like a lot. The idea for this series, like all of my better ones was not my own. Judy, a local resident and regular library patron, approached me one day at the reference desk. She had taken multiple courses based on the Artist's Way over the years and thought the library would be a great place to host another one. At that point, I was only vaguely familiar with the book and admittedly not that interested in it, and so I was a little hesitant to agree. That said, I learned that number one, when patrons request something, whether it be a book or a program, you should do your best to follow through. And two, when one person is interested in something, whether it be a book or a program, usually several are. So with a little encouragement from Judy and a lot of planning, the original in-person series of the Artist's Way workshop was created, which consisted of the following. It was a 6-week, yes, to answer the question, the why though is why would anyone get into a program like the Artist's Way? So it's a 6-week program series. It was 2 hours from 7 to 9. I did find myself frequently closing down the library at around 9:10, 9:15 because people were eager to stay and chat. Each meeting started with a check-in, much like the text. We started with the question, how did your morning pages go this week? What did you do for your artist date? Judy, as my co-leader, and I led a discussion based on the previous week's reading, and time permitting, we completed 1 or 2 of the prompts, one of the tasks together. There was a bit of homework for this program. There was reading every week, there was the morning pages and the artist dates. And it wasn't originally planned, but toward the end of the first series, we realized that we hadn't had an opportunity to really share our creative work with each other. So we decided to do the in-person version was an exhibit where everyone could have their work on exhibit for a month at the library. And we had kind of an opening reception where those who were not visual artists could share their work with the group. So the original series benefited from being advertised as a part of a system-wide program marketing campaign, which meant that the program information and this flyer, unfortunately, was seen by people across multiple counties. There were approximately 15 people who participated in the first 6-week workshop, with most, if not all, attending every session. So for an ongoing program hosted by a library with a population served around 1,000, this was considered a success and therefore led to various iterations, as you can see here, over the next few years. Attendance for these subsequent events has been capped at around 20, with much of the program based in discussion. More than that, even with 2 people facilitating, can become a little unwieldy. So the first series where we attempted to cover 12 weeks of material in half the time, it did feel a little bit rushed for all involved. So for the next, we focused on the first 6 weeks of the book instead, considering as a way to get participants started with the course with the intention of having them finish the material on their own. We also tackled another book in the original Artist's Way trilogy, which is Walking in This World, which gave repeating participants some new material to cover. And for a time, the group even wanted to keep meetings going between 6-week workshops, so we tried a monthly meetup where each meeting we picked random topics and tasks from the book to cover. The monthly meetup was arguably the least successful of the bunch and was discontinued after a while. It was well attended, but not as productive for current participants and less likely to attract newcomers. So let's fast forward to the late winter of 2020 when Judy and I had begun planning for the next set of meetings. The pandemic hit and we were all left wondering not only where to get some toilet paper, but how to proceed with library programming. So how exactly would one take a program designed for an in-person environment and adapt it to be hosted online? Hint, it's not magic. What it really took was a little encouragement from Judy and a lot of planning. So as you may notice here, The new online version of the program series did not change all that much from the in-person version. As many other libraries have found, most discussion-based programming, for example, book clubs, are generally well suited for the online environment. So the Zoom-based version of the Artist's Way workshop consists of what you see here. The two major changes were it became a 1.5-hour evening program from 7 to 8:30 instead of 7 to 9. I'm sure you've all found that, like Sean said, once you reach past a certain time, it's just not a great idea to keep the meeting going. So we kind of cut things off after about an hour and a half, and that worked out fine for everyone. And then we did change the in-person exhibit at the end of the program series to an online showcase. Everything else really remained exactly the same. So why this program works virtually is, and I did want to note, don't let the board faces on the screen fool you. Everyone was very entertained. We all had a great time. So the reasons why the program worked virtually were, for the most part, the same reasons why it worked in person. It's a unique offering. If you kind of look around online, there are not all that many places that are offering these Artist's Way workshops, and those that are tend to have some pretty steep charges for them. I've seen them offered for anywhere between $200 to $500. So the fact that we're offering it and offering it for free is really a big draw. The program also worked because of all the time that was invested by myself, Judy as the co-facilitator, and participants. This program is a lot of work for everyone involved. There's the meetings, there's weekly emails that I would send out between meetings. There's the reading for everyone to do. It also worked because of the program content and the book itself. It's one of those books where you can revisit it 6 months after reading it the first time and you'll learn something new. So it really never gets stale. So for those who were interested in taking the workshop over and over again, that worked out for them. And then for the virtual version, I'd like to say there was lower barrier to participation. There's an asterisk there because this does mean that it's not necessarily true for those who don't have internet access or are not computer savvy. But for those who were participating in the series, which were a lot of older people, they could participate from the comfort of home. They didn't have to come to the library. Many of them did not prefer to drive at night. When we ended at 9 p.m., it was kind of late for them to get going home. And also it gave them the opportunity to share their creative work from the comfort of home. They didn't have to drag their huge canvases from home all the way to the library and back. So why did I, and more importantly, the library administration and library patrons, consider the online program to be a success? For two main reasons, one qualitative and one quantitative. The Artist's Way workshop attracted over 20 participants, both previous and new, many local, a few regional, and one international. While participants may have missed a session or two during these series, there was little to no drop off in participation from week 1 to week 6 for this online version or for any really of the versions before that. Then there's the thing that I like most about this series, and it's the strong bond that formed between the people of varying ages, locations, backgrounds, and interests. From a group of strangers, friendships now exist within and outside of the library environment. And can this success be repeated? I'm about to find out. I will be hosting another online program with Judy in the spring through Valley Cottage. We are going to cover Julia Cameron's latest book, which is conveniently a 6-week workshop called The Listening Path. It's her latest update to The Artist's Way. So what advice can I pass along if you're interested in tackling a similar program? So I have to give one last shout out to Judy. For anyone who's been fortunate enough to have not run every program you do solo, you can know that having another person to run things by and help guide the discussion and answer questions is incredibly valuable. And as Cameron specifically outlines in The Artist's Way, groups completing the course together should have a non-hierarchical experience, so having more than one person acting as facilitator helps to promote this idea. On a related note, when you're going to want to establish a place, whether it be an email list, a Facebook group, or a discussion guide, where participants can communicate with or without you moderating. The ability for the group to have a place to ask questions, give suggestions, and just generally communicate not only enhances the experience during the workshop, but enables the connection to each other to continue beyond its confines. So emails do continue to circulate among our artist survey group as recently as this week. I mentioned the program requiring a lot of planning, multiple times intentionally, creating detailed agendas for each meeting, which I would share with Judy the day before, was necessary to keep everyone, myself included, on the right track. On the Artist's Way journey, it's very easy to get sidetracked, and having a plan helps to keep everyone headed in the same direction. And lastly, and most critically, for any program, always ask for feedback. At the beginning of each 6-week series, we would always ask participants what they were hoping to get out of the program. And during the final meeting, we would check back in to see if one, if they and we accomplished what we set out to do, and two, the group had any suggestions for improving future programs. This was always followed up by me via email with an open invitation to contact me and or Judy with suggestions at any time. So on that note, how did we do? So I think we missed some questions, which we'd be happy to answer now. Let's see.
I can't see the chat, so if there's any.
Okay, so I can, someone asked if am I someone with an arts background? I'm wondering if that's necessary to facilitate a program series like this. I was an art history major and art minor in college. However, I really wouldn't say that's a requirement. Participants in the series have been computer programmers and other fields that you wouldn't necessarily think as all that creative. I think as long as you're willing to kind of do the research and the reading and you want to do it, it's very possible for anyone, even without a creative background. Could I share some agendas for this program? I don't have any that I could share right this second, but I would be definitely happy to share this with anyone who is interested. If you email me at the address on the screen, I'd be happy to share any of my materials from the program with you. Sean, you received the same question, if you could share some of your flyers and prompt worksheets.
I'd be happy to.
I think that's it.
All right. I'm going to stop the share now. If I can find my cursor.
All right, thank you so much. I don't see any other questions, but yeah, round of applause. Anya and Sean, thank you. That was great. I'm not seeing any more questions, so I'm also going to now stop the recording.